All right, when you're ready, thanks.
Right.
Hello and welcome everybody. My name's Kate Lee. I'm the Executive Officer of Union Aid Abroad Australia, the global justice organisation of the Australian Union Movement. Welcome to tonight's webinar. And we're really, really pleased to be able to bring this to you tonight, and we hope that we'll be able to have a great discussion as well about these issues. I want to start by acknowledging Aboriginal land. Tonight I'm on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and sovereignty was never ceded. And I invite you, particularly the Australians here, to acknowledge Aboriginal land in the chat. And to introduce yourself and let us know where you're from tonight. So I just want to remind everyone that this webinar will be recorded, and I also invite you to post questions in the Q&A function in the box at the bottom of your screen. You should see a Q&A function. Please put your questions in there because we are intending to have time for questions tonight. I want to thank our three speakers tonight. I think it'll be a really great discussion where we're going to look in more detail at the labour and environmental issues facing Indonesians at the moment. On October 5, under the cover of the COVID crisis, the Indonesian government has pushed through the job creation law, citing the need to stimulate the economy. Widely referred to as the Omnibus Law, the bill modifies dozens of existing laws, dealing with everything from the environment to taxation to labour rights. Some of the key changes affecting workers, which you'll hear about more tonight, include the removal of entitlements and severance pay for permanent workers, the abolition of the 5-day working week, and an increase in legal overtime. Unions' capacity to represent members is under attack with the removal of provisions allowing dismissed workers to launch an appeal through the Industrial Relations Court. The abolition of sectoral minimum wages will also severely undermine unions' capacity to set the wage agenda. So the social contract is under attack, and the scale of the implications are truly enormous. Indonesia continues to struggle to control the COVID-19 outbreak, and currently 544,000 COVID cases have been detected, with over 17,000 people who have died during the pandemic. The economy is expected to shrink 5.3% in 2020, with some estimates in the retail, hotel, tourism, finance, manufacturing and transport areas worst affected. With over 8 million job losses since the pandemic erupted, this new law will devastate the organised economy and push more workers into the informal economy. Our speakers today will give us an overview of the labour and environmental impacts of the bill. So just to give you a brief introduction of our three speakers, Iqbal Said is the president of the National Labour Confederation, KSPI, an affiliate of the International Trade Union Confederation. He's the head also of the FSPMI, the Metals Union, and an affiliate of Industrial. Michele Ford is director of the Sydney Southeast Asia Centre at the University of Sydney and a long-term researcher on Indonesian labour issues. Yuyun Harmono is climate justice campaigner with WALHI, the umbrella organisation for environmental justice in Indonesia. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the long relationships between unionists in Australia and Indonesia, of environmental campaigns between our two countries, of which there have been many, including those against the imminent threat of climate change and deforestation. Joining us tonight are many people from these struggles from both Indonesia and Australia. I also acknowledge those joining us from INABAN, the Ban Asbestos Network of Indonesia, and Lion Indonesia, who we currently work with in the country in our flagship campaign, Asbestos Not Here, Not Anywhere. So tonight's webinar will inform us all better, particularly those of us in Australia, and so strengthen our links as we face the horrific economic and health fallout of the pandemic, and as we face the existential threat that is climate change. Ultimately, how we more effectively organise across our borders to demand wage and environmental justice in the face of global capital and conservative governments intent on using the COVID crisis to strip us of our rights and to deepen inequality. So with that, I'd like to welcome very much and introduce Iqbal Said, the president of KSPI, who's going to give us KSPI's position on the bill, the impacts on workers and the union, and the work and the campaign that is underway as we speak. Thank you, Iqbal. Over to you.
Thank you, Kate, and all panelists and participants. We are very interesting for discuss about the job creation law. We call the Omnibus law in Indonesia. So I am Iqbal, president of Confederation of Indonesian Trade Union, KSPI. Our member have 2.2 million members in Indonesia. So about the job creation law, Omnibus law, law number 11, 2020, is very, very not good position for labor. Yeah. Is very, very violence of labor right in Indonesian labor. You know, follow the existing law, we call the labor law number 13, 2013. That law, this law is very limited protection for labor about the minimum wage and about the contract workers, outsourcing workers, and another article in the labor law number 13. It's very, very limited protection. We call the social protection floor, limited protection floor for Indonesian labor. But follow the Omnibus law, job creation law, the main protection of Indonesian labor reduce and also erase in the Omnibus law. That I said number 13 is very limited, very protection floor. But Omnibus law less than, and also erase some article in the labor law existing. Is our concern, is I think same concern of the labor movement in the world. The trade union have three concerns about if we discuss if we implementation of the labor law in each country. First, job security. Second, income security issue. And the last, social security issue. If you read and you look Omnibus law number 11, 2020, nothing for job security, nothing, no job security, no income security, and social security is okay, available, but the implementation for social security for the contract workers and outsourcing workers only lip service. We cannot implementation of the social security for the contract workers and outsourcing workers because government said and employer said also employer association Apindo Kadin in Bahasa said this is very protect for the contract workers and outsourcing workers better than the existing law number 13. It is lip service, only lip service. We call in bahasa jaminan kehilangan pekerjaan, lost job security, different unemployment insurance. like some countries' implementation of unemployment insurance. Very different. If follow the Omnibus Law, we cannot implementation in the lost job security like government and employer association say, especially for the contract workers and outsourcing workers. Okay, we want to the presentation. We have 9 issues about the why Indonesian trade union against or rejected to the Omnibus Law. Now we still progress, we still process in the what's the meaning constitutional court. Yeah, constitutional court. We still process constitutional court in Indonesia. We bring 69 article in Omnibus Law, bring to the constitutional court. In 69 article in Omnibus Law, we compress 9 priority issue of Indonesian labor and Indonesian trade union, including KSPI. First, minimum wage issue. Second, contract workers. Third, outsourcing workers. Fourth, severance pay. And then dismissal, the 6 foreign workers, especially Chinese workers, in the unskilled workers. Yeah, this is unskilled workers, not skilled workers. Skilled workers is okay for the foreign workers, but unskilled workers from the Chinese workers is very problem for Indonesian local workers, Indonesian workers. And the 7th, abolition of criminal sanction. And then working time arrangement. And then last, number 9, annual leave arrangement. Okay, and then
ini bukan dijelasin satu-satu. Ini step.
Okay. KSPI action for the against the Omnibus Law. First, judicial review, bring to the court, a constitutional court. Second, we appeal to the Parliament, DPR in Bahasa, please revise to the Omnibus Law. We call by Indonesian Constitutional Legislative Review. And the third, report the violence of Omnibus Law to the ILO. And fourth, dissemination. And fifth, demonstration during the trial in the Constitutional Court. This is action. Okay, we explain you about the 9 issue in Omnibus Law. First, minimum wage. What's problem in the minimum wage? You know, minimum wage follow the ILO Convention number 131. Minimum wage are safety net for the labor. Because if country don't have minimum wage, labor become poor, absolutely poor. Very, very absolutely poor. For example, in Indonesia, in Jakarta, Indonesian capital city, now minimum wage in Indonesia approximately 4.5 million rupiah, approximately 300, I think $300 per month. Okay, if you look and you request to people of Jakarta, especially fresh graduate high school, you pay salary to them only $200, they accept your request. Because supply and demand in Indonesian employment pyramid is higher supply than the demands, more than unemployment. So it's very weakness negotiate from the labor if they want to get salary. So we need state or government influence, protect to the labor salary. We call the minimum wage. In Indonesia, the law existing, number 13, we have four types minimum wage. First, we call the province minimum wage, in bahasa UMP, and then sectoral province minimum wage, we call the UMSP, and then district or regional minimum wage, we call the UMK, and then sectoral district or regional minimum wage, we call the UMSK. In Indonesia, have 34 province and 514 district or regional or prefecture. Majority implementation minimum wage in Indonesia use the UMK and UMSK. Yeah, UMK then MUNSK. More than 400 prefecture or district or regional implementing UMK, and perhaps more than 100 prefecture implementation UMSK. All district or prefecture not use the UMMP. What's the meaning UMP? Province minimum wage. UMP is the cheaper of nominal UMK in the one province. It means no prefecture, not district or regional, don't implementation of UMP. All prefecture, all district, all regional, only implementation or using or use the UMK or UMSK. And in Omnibus law, erase. Okay? It means Indonesian policy get back, come back, set back to the cheaper wages, like Suharto era, like new era, like Suharto era. What's the meaning is for our countries? It's problem. You know, in Indonesia, not one minimum wage in the national. We have 514 minimum wage UMK in national. The high approximately the $400, and the lowest approximately $80. $80 is average approximately $180 per month. It's very cheaper. Very cheaper. No omnibus law, less than cheaper. State not protect for the labor. Like I said, in Jakarta, if employer want to pay the labor only less than 100, labor get it. Labor okay, because supply and demand, but no protect from state or government. I don't agree that policy. We need a lot of state protect for the labor about the social, economic, and culture in the Human Rights Declaration. follow our basic constitutional, we call UUD 1945. This is against not follow the UUD 19 is our constitutional, basically our constitutional. So follow the the existing law number 13, increasing minimum wage based on by inflation rate plus economic growth rate. Follow the Omnibus law, optional inflation rate, or not end, or economic growth less than, very cheaper. And you know, how about the penting yang penting, kamu nggak usah ngajarin saya. It's very important about Indonesia now, the rich country, G20, number 7 in the purchasing power parity, GDP parity, number 7 in the world. But it follow if Omnibus law starting implementation about the minimum wage, about the severance pay, about the what's the meaning? Welfare of labor is very low. This is problem. It's our concern. And about the second issue, yeah, this is first issue. And the second issue,
Brother Iqbal, just before you start
yes.
on the second issue, I might have to ask you to perhaps move through the issues a bit faster, just so we can cover our other speakers, but a little bit. Thank you. I know there's a lot to talk about, so please continue.
Okay. So the second issue about dismissal, because reduce nominal of dismissal in the about the severance pay, yeah. And then the third issue, contract workers, follow the existing law. Contract workers limited period and limited term of the contract period, yeah.
Only 3 years.
Total 5 years for the contract workers and 3 period. After 5 years, the contract workers become permanent workers. Follow the Omnibus law, the period and term of contract workers erase. It means all workers in Indonesia, fresh graduate or the established workers, can long lifetime for the contract. No job security, no income security, because only minimum wage for the contract workers. No job security, not limit for the term of the contract and period. And the fourth issue about outsourcing. This is the slavery, modern slavery, because follow the law existing number 13, employer can use outsourcing workers only 5 kind of industry: cleaning service, security, driver, catering, and then supporting of the mining industry or oil industry. But follow the new law, Omnibus law, all kind of industry. It means one factory can use more than 90% outsourcing workers in the operational of the factory, of the company. It's very modern slavery. You know, outsourcing by agent. Only minimum, they get only laborers only get the minimum wage every year minimum wage, and easy hiring, easy firing, easy dismissal, no protection for the social security. It means no job security, no income security, no social security for issue of the contract workers and outsourcing workers. And the others, dismissal, government said easy hiring, easy firing. Where's the state? Where's the government for protection of labor? If easy hiring, easy firing. And the other side, the problem only limited social protection, no job security, no income security. We don't agree. Easy hiring, easy firing. And then about the foreign workers, because in Indonesia, in Indonesia, it's very easy unskilled workers, especially from Chinese in Indonesia, work in Indonesia. And the other side, we still have unemployment rate is high. And the Chinese workers, unskilled workers, skilled workers is okay, no problem. Unskilled workers from the Chinese disturb to the local workers, because local workers cannot work in the Chinese investment in the field, in the province or in the regional. This is problem, because before follow the existing law, what's the meaning? Foreign workers, especially skilled or unskilled workers, should have to exit permitted from the labor minister. But follow the Omnibus law, they don't meet the permitted from the government labor minister. And then about the meaning criminal sanction, reduce the abolition of the criminal sanction, and then erase the annual leave arrangement, and also working time arrangement is very exploitation for the labor. Okay, it's already. That's all. Thank you very much. And
sorry. Thank you, Iqbal. Thank you. When we come back for questions, we'll probably have some more time to go over those issues in a bit more detail as well. So thank you for that overview. I mean, there's no doubt that, as you say, it was so important to spend that time on talking about what's happening to the minimum wage, because without that floor, we all know what results, and that's extreme poverty. And no doubt you're witnessing that right now. So I'll move on to our second speaker, who is Michele Ford, who, as I said earlier, is the director of the Sydney Southeast Asia Centre at Sydney University, here in where I am as well, in Sydney. And she's going to give us a little bit of background and overview, particularly around the gains and losses for the Indonesian labour movement since 2012-13, that big upheaval where the movement won so much that we're now seeing stripped away with this new law. So Michele, over to you. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Kate. It's great to have Iqbal having spoken before me, because of course Iqbal was a key player in all the things I'm going to talk about. So the thing I want to really get across to you today is that the Omnibus Law is part of a longer trajectory. It's the last stage, the most recent stage, in a process since 2015 where the Jokowi government, the Joko Widodo government, has worked to undermine the power that the unions gained in 2012 to 2014. Most of the talk I'm going to give today will come from the book that's the pictures on the screen, Labour and Politics in Indonesia, which I wrote with my colleague Terry Caraway. So I'm going to talk about three things. First, gaining momentum through the wage struggles. Iqbal's talked a lot about wages, and of course wages have been a really key part of the union story in Indonesia since around 2012. Then I'm going to talk about how that rolled into a political struggle. Unionists, including Iqbal, used to be rather allergic to politics, but we can certainly see from 2013 to now that that has changed. And finally, the section I was just talking about the backlash from 2015. Wage struggles were a vital part in the post-Suharto puzzle, especially from 2002-15, after the local wage councils were formed. These were really interesting because what happened was wage determination was decentralised, was taken down to the city and district level. And although there was supposed to be a calculation then based on the price of foodstuffs and so on, actually it became a really important arena for bargaining. And unions had a great lot of success bargaining for huge wage increases during that time. This was important not just for individual unions, but also unions worked together in a way they'd never worked together before, and they worked together at the local level. So this was a huge mobilisational force at the local level, where local union branches that had just been in name for most of their existence suddenly were the height of activity, the really vibrant part of the union movement. And this was really interesting because, of course, street-based struggle fed into these wage struggles. And at the same time, politics was decentralised to this same level at the city and the district. So you had this perfect storm, as it were, where you had people suddenly needing vote support. They wanted it from workers in the industrial areas, and what workers wanted in return were wage rises. And as you'll see on my next slide, we had some enormous wage rises in 2013, 2014. You can see there, in some locations in Java, they're actually up to 70%, but the average for Java and in Batam was 45% in a single year. So you can imagine that employers were not very happy about this, and they did a great deal to encourage government to stop. But for a while, Labor held its ground, and government, in fact, in many places supported Labor over employers, even though they had the casting vote in the wage councils. But as you'll see, after that peak, there was a rapid decline. And it's that rapid decline I'll come back to in my third section. But first, I want to talk a bit more about this political angle. So what we saw was a shift from the wage struggles, which were clearly economic, to a broader push for programmatic politics. And this is really unusual in Indonesia. In Indonesia, most politicians don't have an agenda. Parties don't have a platform per se. It's very much about personality politics, about charisma and so on. So the Labour movement's efforts to get a programmatic push into the political arena was really special. I'm, of course, not going to go through this table, but you can see both at the local and at the provincial level, in a number of important industrial centres around Indonesia, Labor candidates did deals with, Labor unions did deals with candidates, and those deals were about classic labourist agendas, minimum wages, about getting employment protections, transports for workers, education and so on. There were some places where patronage also played a part, and no discussion of Indonesian politics is complete without reference to patronage. But compared to other social groups, the unions really pushed for a program that would actually support workers. This came to a head in 2014 when Iqbal became rather notorious at the international level for supporting Prabowo, who's a human rights abuser and maybe not the most obvious partner for Labor. There is a backstory to this that I've written about, and maybe Iqbal can talk about in the question time. But ultimately, Prabowo was the candidate who agreed to 10 points that would support workers. And so the metal workers, which Iqbal heads, and to a lesser extent the KSPI, the Confederation, supported Prabowo. We did a survey of 800 workers in two areas around Jakarta, and it's the red figures I want to show to you. In Bekasi, where the metal workers are strongest, you can see there was over a 20-point bump for Prabowo among the workers we interviewed compared to the actual overall results. Even in Tangerang, where a less active union supported Prabowo, you can see there was still a jump. So there's a long story behind this that I can't go into now, but you can see that Labor, contrary to people's expectations, did actually have a political impact in areas where industry is concentrated. And that's a very important point, that this is not an Indonesia-wide story. It's about a few concentrations of industrial power across the country. That led on to an even braver step, which was trying to get trade unionists elected. They don't have a Labour Party in Indonesia, despite a few attempts to get one up. So a number of unions, including Iqbal's unions, did deals with different parties and tried to get candidates in. Most of these attempts failed. And in many cases, people who were trade unionists actually won for other reasons. But again, the metal workers did have some success in getting people who were actually standing on a union platform elected. So between the political story and the wage story, you can see why both government and employers were very worried about what they could see was the rising momentum of Labor. And of course, Prabowo didn't win the election. And when he didn't win the election, there was a price to pay for when Jokowi came to power. Jokowi, it's interesting because Jokowi presented as a human rights candidate compared to Prabowo, and there are reasons for that. But in office, he has certainly not been a friend of human rights advocates and even less of a friend of Labor. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time before I finish talking you through some of the actions that preceded the Omnibus Law that Iqbal has told us about. So Jokowi moved very fast to domesticate the unions. He rewarded some union leaders who had supported him with lucrative commissionary positions. He also reached out to Iqbal and invited him to a few events and so on, and smoothed the way after a period in the wilderness. But more importantly, he returned to Suharto era tactics of controlling Labor. So Labor activists reported being followed, being called into the intelligence office and so on. And this was across a number of unions. It wasn't just one union. Another really important thing is that a regulation that had been introduced by Megawati when she was president about vital objects, which was an anti-terrorist regulation, had under SBA been extended to factories and industrial parks. But within a very short period of time, the Jokowi government had doubled the number of industrial parks and factories that this applied to. And what that meant is you were not allowed strike within the zone, and the military could intervene if you did. So this was a very big push against freedom of association and collective action. And then finally, and this is the big killer when it comes to wages, was Government Regulation number 78, introduced in 2015, which eliminated the role of the local wage councils as bargaining arenas and introduced the equation that Iqbal was talking about before the Omnibus Law, that actually took unions' power to leverage local politics for economic gains out of the picture. So in one fell swoop, this regulation undercut not only unions' economic bargaining power, but also a lot of their political bargaining power. And although many unions have struggled to maintain influence since then, it certainly had a really big impact on the way unions operated and on their effectiveness. So how does the Omnibus Law fit into this picture? It was actually introduced before COVID in February 2020. And as you've heard from Iqbal, it was very wide-ranging, but the Employers Association chair has acknowledged that its main spirit was labour reform. So although it deals with environment and business issues, the Employers Association certainly thinks it's mostly about labour. Unions were concerned about this and started lobbying the president, and they threatened to strike in April. I think one thing about FSPMI and KSPI is they were certainly ahead of the curve in awareness about the dangers of COVID. So this wasn't a step that they took lightly, but in fact, Iqbal and his colleagues from some other confederations met with the president and an agreement was reached. The strike was called off in exchange for a period of more negotiation. That didn't work out so well. Some unions walked out. There were some large-scale processes and protests, and finally the law was signed into law. The bill was signed into law on the 2nd of November. Now, Iqbal's already talked you through the implications, but just to summarise them, basically the most important ones are first, the removal of restrictions on outsourcing and contract work. This was already a really big problem in Indonesia, but it's been made legal now as opposed to illegal. Under the old law, only a few areas, 5 areas of non-core work were allowed to be put out to contract. It's seen reductions in leave entitlements and severance pay, the abolition of the 5-day working week, and an increase in legal overtime. It's reduced the role of the industrial relations courts because dismissal claims can no longer be pursued there. And of course, this undercuts the unions. And as Iqbal spent most of his time talking about, it's abolished the sectoral minimum wages, which were the last point where unions could really influence wages. So it's really, I feel for Iqbal and his colleagues because they're really facing an uphill battle now to try to find a strategy to get around this law. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Michelle. And thanks for some of that background and overview, particularly for some people who aren't so familiar in our audience. We've got one question so far. So please get your questions in the box there, in the Q&A box, if you have them. We're just going to spend a couple of minutes now on some questions for Iqbal and Michele, and then we're going to move on to Yuyun to talk about the environmental impacts. Then if we have time, we'll come back to more questions in the end. But there is a question here in the Q&A box asking about the impact of the Omnibus Law on recruitment and employment of Indonesian migrant workers overseas. Iqbal, would you be able to comment on if there are any impacts for Indonesian migrant workers?
Migran untuk Indonesia di Omnibus Law itu nggak ada?
Yeah, the problem of migrant workers Indonesian is no protection for migrant workers when they work in the foreign country. For example, government cut the what's the meaning? Insurance dues from the migrant workers for the health security, for health insurance. But the implementation in the foreign countries, they cannot use for the use of the health insurance. And the other side about when the Indonesian migrant workers get jail, go to the jail, arrested in the jail, government not not full protect, full support, full full advocated to the immigrant workers. And follow Omnibus Law, same situation. This is problem. No protection, no social security, especially health insurance, and also no pension system for migrant workers.
Mm-hmm.
This is problem, follow the Omnibus Law. That's all.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if you want to comment on that one, Michele, as well, or otherwise I'll go to another question.
Yeah, I might just add that what the Omnibus Law is actually, the government's tried to sell it as a pro-migrant law, migrant worker law, because it promises to streamline the processes around recruitment and departure, in the process moving it from the manpower ministry to the central government. The problem with this is that a lot of migrant workers don't actually go through formal channels. And as Iqbal said, the protections for even those who go through formal channels aren't very good. They're even worse, of course, for people who go through other channels. And there are lots of reasons to go through other channels because the official system is expensive and also it doesn't actually guarantee your safety.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the next question is asking, what are the moves here? Political or on the ground militancy, or a mix of both? Do you think a wider group of people will be concerned about the Omnibus Law and the status of workers generally after the impacts are felt? So I guess we're trying to understand a bit here about your forward-thinking strategy and how people are responding now, how workers are responding now, and how the impacts are being felt. And I know that across unions, there is a lot of work being done to raise awareness about the laws right now. So Iqbal, maybe you can see the question in the Q&A as well if you want to read it yourself.
For the UMSK, implementation of UMSK in Indonesia. Priority UMSK in Indonesia implementation in industry district, because follow the Omnibus Law, sectoral minimum wage erase and already erased, follow the Omnibus Law, it means the capital intensive and labor intensive same minimum wage. For example, Prefor. This is labor capital intensive, and then Toyota capital intensive, and the labor intensive like garment, textile is very cheaper minimum wage. Same with the Toyota and Prefor. This is unfair. So I need still have the UMSK, sectoral minimum wage. And about the second asking, apa sih?
We might come back to some of the questions later, Iqbal, if that's all right with you. Michele, did you want to make any final comments? Because I think we'll move to Yuyun and then come back to answer some of these questions if we have time.
I was thinking maybe just clarifying that for Iqbal. Iqbal, pertanyaan mereka tentang strategi, apa strategi KSPI menghadapi Omnibus, apa protes di perjalanan atau bagaimana? Mungkin bisa dijawab secara singkat ya sebelum kita teruskan.
Against the Omnibus Law, first, we continue the demonstration and strike in the national level and also including the district level. Because strike or demonstration is constitutional, not only judicial review constitutional. The second, we bring to the constitutional court for the judicial review of Omnibus Law. And the third, we pressure to the parliament, please revise Omnibus Law. We call the legislative review. By legislative review. And then the last, our strategy, we campaign, we continuous campaign by social media, by mainstream media and etc. And then also go to the each district, each regional campaign about content of Omnibus Law is very dangerous for the labor way, and it means we have to continue of the struggling, attack and against the Omnibus Law. This is our strategy.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to come back to some more questions after the next speaker. So I'm going to move to our third speaker now, Yuyun Harmono, who is the climate justice campaigner for WALHI. And he's going to focus on the impact of the Omnibus Bill on environmental protections and the broader context of the climate justice struggle in Indonesia. Thank you, Yuyun, and welcome. Over to you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, all of the panelists. It's really inspiring, and of course, we support the struggle of the labor movement to revoke this Omnibus Law. I will have some small presentation because all of the other participants, they present themselves, so I'll do the same thing. This is quite a good picture to understand what is the Omnibus Law in the sense of environment as well as the labor movement. So this is.
Can you put it on full screen for us, Yuyun? Is that possible?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so this is the agenda of the Jokowi's government, especially the second term of the Jokowi's government, to full speed ahead to push the GDP growth, yeah, in the expense of the natural resource and the cheap labor. Yeah, we signed a lot of trade agreement before the omnibus. We signed the trade agreement between Indonesia and Australia as well, and we are trying to have another agreement with the other countries. Recently, we signed the RCEP, the Regional Pact of Free Trade Agreement, which Indonesia are part of it, and this is happening because we want to push for more growth. Yeah. But growth itself is problematic. because it's create a lot of pollution, it create a lot of carbon emission, it's create a lot of environmental destruction as well as the waste, yeah. And some of cases, the waste problem is not only happening in Indonesia but also in Australia as well, and it's also problematic that Australia exporting waste to Indonesia, yeah. So it's kind of a economy that we are facing today, and it's not only a problem of environment, but it's also a problem of the labor movement as well. Before the omnibus law are approved by the parliament, we say that we have a concern on this law. Yeah, we have a 6 main concern. The first one would be there is no public and meaningful participation of this law. We say that in terms of the process, this law is inconstitutional. Yeah, we haven't talked yet about the content of this law. Yeah, but in terms of the process, there is a problem, and it's for us it's not reflecting the will of the people. That's why in our statement we say that the enactment of omnibus law, the approval of omnibus law in the parliament, is a betrayal of the public trust, not only to the parliament but also to the government itself. In the omnibus law, the participation of public at large will be revoked. Yeah, the only participation from the project assessment, especially the environmental impact assessment, would only involving the direct impacted communities. So not communities that living surrounding, yeah, but the communities impacted directly. And it's also not allowing the civil society to be involved in the consultation of the environmental impact assessment. In that way, this is how this omnibus law are creating the situation where there is a limited public participation, especially when they decide whether they approve the project or not, for example. The second one is that the environmental impact assessment is only on the risk based, based on the risk. Yeah, even though we understand that in the previous regulation before the omnibus law, it's also based on the risk, but it is guaranteed that in some project that is big enough, it will impact the environment and the social condition, they have to have the environmental impact assessment. But in omnibus law, all of the projects are assessed based on the risk. If it's really higher, then it's required to have AMDAL or environmental impact assessment. But if it's not, then it's not required to have an AMDAL. And central government are deciding that risk. The third one would be the environmental permit will be revoked in omnibus law. The environmental permit is the way of how the community can access justice, because we can bring that to the administrative court. We can challenge that environmental permit in administrative court, but then because of the omnibus law, we cannot do that anymore. Yeah. So the people who's impacted, even though it's not directly impacted with the project, they lost their right to access justice, and that things are facilitating by the omnibus law. The fourth one would be regarding the punishment for the violator of the environmental permit. It's only the governments or the because of the omnibus law, they only put forward the administrative sanction, yeah, and try to avoiding the criminal or civil sanction. In that sense, for the companies or the plantation who violating this environmental permit, they can get away with the minimum sanction, only the administrative sanction. The five main concern for us is that the principle of strict liability it means that the companies or plantation who have a permit from the governments, they have a responsibility to taking care of their concession. If in their concession, there is a forest fire or peatland fire, they are directly responsible for that, without any proof. They have to present themselves that they are doing their best to prevent that. Yeah. So the burden to have a proof is not to the governments, or to in the court, but the company itself have to prove that they are doing their best to prevent the forest fire, for example. So it will be eliminated, and the last one would be, it will be centralizing in terms of the licensing, as well as supervision. This is a problem because of the Indonesian structure, especially in the governments now. The role of the district governments are also big. We have a law on that, the autonomy's law. But then now the central government wants everything to be centralized again. So the autonomy is also part of the demand in the Reformation movement, where we need to decentralize the power, not centralizing again. And when the governments are pushing this omnibus law, it's the same that we are a setback to the new order government. But I want to have a really good talk with the labor movement on how we define the future. There is a problem in the economy in Indonesia because of the COVID, because of the recession, and so on and so on. But there is also a big threat on the environment and the climate crisis as well. We have to talk this as well, because most of the labor will be impacted. Most of the community living in the front line, in the lowland, in the coastal area, in the small island will be impacted directly. And we have to talk on the impact of omnibus law in escalating the climate crisis in Indonesia. This is not the future that it wants. The sky in Jambi is turning red in 2019 because of the forest and peatland fire, and the companies who's creating it are get away from it, and because of the omnibus law, they will be easy to get away from their responsibility, even though they are creating disaster and escalating the climate crisis. This is my last slide. This is the proposal on how we define the economy for the future. So it's not only based on growth, but it's based on the people happiness. It's based on how we can still have prosperity in the border, in our biophysical border, in our climate border, and so on. So we have to define on how we can create another economy other than an economy that pushing for more growth in the expense of the environment, the climate, and also the cheap labor. Thank you very much. We can continue with the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Yuyun. I'm going to kick off with the first question to you, because I think many of us would like to hear from you in terms of some examples, both examples and also where you see the campaign around the environmental, the stripping of the environmental protections of the law, where that campaign is going. So maybe you can give an example of, I don't know, one of the corporations that would benefit from the legislation, who they are, what they do to the environment communities, who is benefiting. That's my first question. And the second one is, give us a bit of a sense of your overall campaign in terms of trying to push back against this bill. Thank you.
Yeah, I will answer the last question, and then I'll move on with the example. for the strategy, of course, we are expecting the strategy to go to the Constitutional Court. But for us, because of this process of this law is also constitutional, then we choose to do it from the ground. Yeah, we will warn the community the impact of the Omnibus law and how they have to defend their territory against the harmful investment. And then I will answer the first question: whose companies that benefiting from this Omnibus law? The one would be the companies that work or their business is the extractive business. Yeah, mention a few from the coal mining. Yeah, and also coal power plant. The second one would be the palm oil. Yeah, because the government's saying that in order to reduce the dependency on the oil import, they will replace it with the biofuel which come from the palm oil. And they said in order to have a similar amount of 1 million barrel per day that will be provided by the biofuel, they need to extend the amount of land, yeah, to plant the palm oil twice from now on. So they said that it should be extended twice. We have already 15 million hectare of palm oil in Indonesia, and they would like to extend it until 30 million hectare, just to replace the oil, yeah, and the oil dependency of Indonesia. Of course, for us, this is a false solution. They're just replacing the dirty energy with the another dirty energy, yeah, quote unquote. The dirty energy, which they're saying the biofuel, is coming from the destruction of the forest for the huge palm oil plantation. So there is a labor in palm oil industries. We aware of that. It creates jobs and so on. But this is the job, yeah. So that's why we need to talk of future. This is the job that we didn't want. We need to transform this economy, not only dependent on the fossil fuels or the false solution, but we need to create something new beyond that. And this is that we are advocating on the ground. We work with the indigenous community in Central Kalimantan, rejecting the expansion of palm oil. Yeah, we also working with the community in the city level, try to educate them about the impact of industrial activities on their water. Yeah. Also, we work with the youths on the climate issues, as well as the youth to reduce the plastic that will create more destruction in the environment. We open to the dialogue with the labor movement so that we can create more progressive agenda other than their sector. Yeah, but we can broaden this alliance so that we can propose something new, and then we can build together the movement. Yeah, because there is no political parties today that they will listen to labor, or political party today that they will listen the environmental movement. That we need to bring more coalition and collaboration to build the political agenda. Yeah, in our own way, in our own hand. Yeah, not only depend to the older parties or these governments, especially in the second term of the Jokowi.
Okay, thank you, Yuyun. It's for those people that joined us late. We did say we were going over an hour tonight because we had 3 speakers and we knew it would be hard to fit in 1 hour. So thank you everybody who are still here online. If you have any final questions, put them in the Q&A box. And we are aiming to finish by 8:15 at the latest. And thank you to the speakers who have already answered some of the questions in the box. So you can go to the Q&A box and see and read some of the answers to some questions that have been already put forward. I might just go to a couple of others. I don't think we've covered this question about, or maybe we did, about how long the judicial review is going to take and whether there is any optimism about that. That's one question. Of course, the bigger question then for all of us in Australia is, and perhaps I can ask particularly Iqbal and Yuyun, but maybe Michele might want to comment as well. What are the elements of international solidarity that we can engage with you in this time of COVID, where there are some limits to what we can do physically, but we're interested in that. But perhaps someone might respond to the judicial review question. I don't think we've talked specifically about that. Maybe Iqbal, you might like to comment.
Thank you, Kate, and all participants. Thank you, Kate, and all participants. How long the judicial review in the Constitutional Court? Approximately 2 months. Approximately 2 months. And already decision from the judge of the Constitutional Court. And the first trial, we start the 24th November this year. Already trial, and perhaps January we can get already decided from the judge, yeah. And the second trial, 7th of the December this year. It's very long. This month. Very long. This month. Yeah, and very long. So yes, we are optimistic. Yeah, very optimistic, because we combine the demonstration strategy or strike strategy with the judicial review strategy, and also pressure to the parliament. We need the legislative review. We combine, and also we continuous campaign by social media. It's very effective. Campaign by social media is very effective. And like Yuyun said, we are agree, make the big coalition, big alliance with the WALHI, the KSPI, with the another NGO, another trade union, because this is the common enemy. All people, the farmer organization, the fishermen organization, the labor organization, the environmental activists and human rights organization, and also including the religion organization. Is very big religion organization like Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah also against the Omnibus Law. This is common enemy all people. Yes, we can do it. And best effort make the big coalition if we lost the judicial review. If government don't hear what what's the meaning, what the demand from the people, including environmental and labor issue and fishermen and farmer issue, another issue. We are optimistic. We are will, like Michele said, we had the experience when the labor pressure to the government pressure to labor, and labor attack and fight back to the government, like wages increasing issue, like social security issue by KAGS, the big alliance of the people, not only labor but NGO and another organization, another group. We take action by KAGS, we are win, like the social security issue. And then we need international solidarity, yes. From APEDA, from another solidarity, from GAF, from ITUC, from industry all and others, we need international solidarity. For example, you can send the protest letter of protest about the Omnibus Law. And then perhaps you can give me for the training and education for the labor, each regional or each district about how the negative impacts of the Omnibus Law, if Omnibus Law implemented in Indonesia, for environmental, for the labor right, and so on. Because the training and education is very, very important. Change mindset of the labor, change mindset of the people, because Omnibus Law is very, very dangerous. It's very liberal against our constitution, UUD 1945, against the human being, against the human act, against the women workers. It's very dangerous. If Indonesia can implement it for Omnibus Law, we are believed in other countries, especially developing countries, I think rich countries also want to change by Omnibus Law. You know, after COVID-19, is very new era for situation in the world, including in Asia Pacific. This is our problem and the world problem, the labor problem, the international solidarity problem, and perhaps perhaps you can arrange and hold the protest in the Indonesian embassy in each country, and etc. No, ITUC and industry all, especially Sharan Burrow, General Secretary of ITUC, and also Yoshida, General Secretary of ITUC AP, already want to hold the international solidarity. That's all.
All right, great. Thank you, Iqbal. I'm just going to give 30 seconds final comments to Michele and then Yuyun. So anything final from you, Michele, before we wrap up?
Yes, I think this is a really important issue. It's the biggest challenge that the labour movement in Indonesia has faced since the fall of Suharto, and anything that Australia can do to help, we should be doing it.
Okay, short and sharp. Thanks. Yuyun, from you, any final comments from you?
The land grabbing, the pollution, more destruction of the forest will happening because of this law. It is also important to have international solidarity against this law, but inside the country, it's also important to have a dialogue between all of the sector to have a new paradigm on how we can imagine the future. What is the future that we would like to have? Thank you.
Okay. I think everybody would, support the need for more dialogue between us all. In the context of a pandemic, we must build more collaboration everywhere, globally and particularly across the labour and social movements. There's no doubt about that. As Michele mentioned, this is the biggest threat to Indonesia, and Iqbal has certainly made that clear as well tonight, the biggest threat for many, many years to the labour movement. And the Omnibus Bill represents, unfortunately, a common trajectory globally as we face a global recession or depression, and we're seeing the stripping of workers' rights and environmental rights when we need them most. We need those things most now around the world, particularly in the face of climate change and in the face of the impact and escalating poverty around the world as a result of the pandemic. So I want to finish by thanking the speakers today for being with us, making their presentations, giving up their time to help share so that we, particularly in Australia, can build a greater understanding of the situation there, and to be able to build better links so that we can support the struggle in Indonesia in the coming months and years. And I know that there are many people, as I said earlier, in Australia who have deep connections and links with Indonesians as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you again to our speakers. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I'd like to ask people, particularly those Australians online, if you're not a member of a feeder, then jump to our website, go online and join. because you can be part of a group of Australians who work together for internationalism, for education of Australians around international struggles, and to provide practical and financial support to those struggles. And the website is there in the chat box. So I encourage everybody online who isn't a member of AFIDA to join today. So thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Particular thanks to our speakers as well. Okay, thank you and good night, everybody.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Michelle. Yuyun, bye.